Hello, people. Andrew here, talking about comics from a reader, collector, speculator, investor point of view, in that order of importance to myself. And today, doing part three, the final part of the first volume of Ultimate X-Men. Now, this part, for the most part, from issues 66 to 93, are written by Robert Kirkman, who you might know having written The Walking Dead and Invincible. So, what's his take on the Ultimate X-Men? A brief note about the art: there was a number of different artists involved in throughout this run. You had Tom Rainey, Ben Oliver, Yannick Paquet, Salvador LaRocca. Um, and I think all of the art was fine. None of it really wowed me or made me sit up and take notice. I think the stuff by Ben Oliver was probably the best of the bunch, but it was just fair stuff. It was nothing to write home about. So it's all about the story here, and how was the story in the hands of Robert Kirkman. Well, I found that this material, it was, I was entertained. I was entertained while reading this series, but I wasn't. Even though this is taking place in an alternate version of the another world with an alternate take on the X-Men, there are some X-Men that actually go through a significant change in attitude and what have you. The biggest one, I think, was Dazzler. When Dazzler was first created in the late 70s, she was part of the disco craze. And there was actually a movie in the works to be a Dazzler film and an actual album sung by the character who played Dazzler, and that was part of the package to be released along with the comic book. But that never materialized. We still get Dazzler, who's a little bit on the disco scene with the bright lights as being her sort of her shtick type of thing. And in the Ultimate X-Men, because this is written so many years later, this was, as I say, written between the years 2006 2009, and as Dazzler was introduced like last block, it's more of a punk grunge type of Dazzler. She swears and curses a fair amount. She's got very different, outfit as well as attitude. Very much into the street, into gutter talk, and her powers change throughout this particular block as well, no longer being just a spectacular light show to dazzle, but they're actually explosions of light that she can then build up to be like full on explosions that can destroy things. She was the biggest change as far as characters are concerned. Many of the others are very similar and they have a little bit of tweaks here and there. And I also found that as the series progressed, and in Robert Kirkman's run, some of the characters that started off stronger with a difference in the personality, they got softer, or some of the elements were left behind. Jean Grey is an example of that. I found that when Mark Millar was writing it in the beginning, she was full of confidence and swagger. And as time has gone on, the confidence is still there, not quite as strong and out there, but the swagger seems to be gone completely. And she becomes a little bit more docile in the way she approaches things. So our first story arc with Robert Kirkman is just something called Date Night, where everybody's sort of connecting again, and it's he's getting his feet wet with some of these characters to understand their relationships and what have you. X Men, when it was the new X Men, when Chris Claremont and Dave Cockrum took over in the '70s, and then with John Byrne, was very relationship heavy. I just read an article or a part of a book recently that was indicating that Chris Claremont would like nothing better than an entire book at that time. There was nothing but the characters talking and philosophizing and avoiding fights altogether. Just a book of talking heads experiencing this. So the emotional thing, the relationships, that's always been a big part of the X-Men, and Robert Kirkman leans into that with his first story arc, Date Night. Teams up again. We get to see a little bit of Scott and Jean Grey. Rogue and Iceman connect again because Rogue, having absorbed Gambit's powers, no longer can absorb other people's powers, so she can be touched again, and they have their on again, off again relationship. Wolverine's out there. So, anyways, it's to get reintroduced to these characters. So, Date Night was the first one. And here's a storyline that's sort of been going throughout the entire Ultimate line, and that's about Phoenix and the Phoenix power. And once again, I think Professor X once again proves in these with Robert Kirkman that he is the stupidest smart man in the room. He's trying to get funding for his school now that he's broken ties with Shield and whatever, and he speaks to this woman Lalander, who then he beds at some point in time. That she's the Church of the Phoenix, Church of the Shi'ar or something. I know she's connected to the Shi'ar. It's supposed to be, Anyways, they have this ancient religion, which is really like a cult that says the Phoenix will return, and they think that Jean Grey may be the Phoenix herself because of some of the stuff that she did during the Hellfire Club, perhaps. But they want to do some testing on her, and if they allow the testing with Jean, then they can have the funding. And Charles says, okay, I'll ask Jean, and Jean says, whatever. And away they go. So the test is done, and they decide that, oh no, she's not the Phoenix, because based on these tests. And now here's where it's kind of the stupidest smart person in the room. Number one, did you ask to see the results? No, I didn't see that happening. Number two, did you examine what the tests were all about? I mean, this is some ancient religion. It's like Nostradamus saying, if you did this and you did that, this will show something. Hundreds of years ago, perhaps it's a dopey sort of scripture to base a test on. Have you examined that? No, you haven't done that. And I know I'm never going to go into somebody's head and pick out their thoughts. No, but there's this guy here that's standing there saying that, all the tests are negative. You want to take a look, perhaps, and see something. No, and it's just everything's fine. Jean, you're fine. The excuse giving that your parents were part of this church thing when you were young, and you sort of block that out, but you've remembered the stories they told you about the Phoenix, and so you're manifesting that Phoenix energy, just because of to help solve your telepathic powers, to explain away some of your telepathic powers. It helps you cope with the situation. And everybody says, okay, that's fine, and move on. But, the test results show that indeed she is the Phoenix power based on this old wisdom and stuff, but he's, the guy doing the test, he's lying. How about that? And what I don't get is that, all of that, sure, it's all the paperwork, and Charles just being la 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 because he wants to bed Lalander. And he wants the money, so he doesn't care what they say. But, just the thought of, you've seen Jean execute the Phoenix Force and manifest it. And even Lalander, in this particular block, she runs into the Phoenix when it manifests itself, and the Phoenix Force is very nasty and very drunk. It says, I'm going to boil your innards. I'm going to, before I kill you, I'm going to boil your kidney and turn it into soup. To say people can live without their kidneys for like 2 hours or whatever it is. Can you do that if your kidney is nothing more than soup? So she's manifesting all of this, and then to say afterwards, no, it's just you heard about this stuff from your mom and dad, and they talked to it. It's like you're just turning a blind eye to the obvious. I get Jean, wanting to sort of try and find some sort of solution, but even she must know that it's not just a manifestation of her consciousness or something that she's seen in the past. And really, Professor X to be the sort of this very smart, alert type of fellow just turns a blind eye to it. How stupid can you be, Mr. Professor X? Well, he gets to be more stupid. So there was those sort of things crop up within the book itself about some of the changes in characters and some of the illogical moves and things that are being made, and sometimes that detracts from it. But overall, as I said, I was fairly entertained. These little gremlin things that are all over Jean Grey, they're sort of manifested that she manifests in her mind. They're figments of her imagination to help explain her telepathy and her telekinesis, the way that she can move things around. So nobody else sees them, but she does. So then, here was another weird sort of thing. We move into this area about a new character by the name, they call him the Magician. And I had some issues with this, and I still am not sure exactly what happened here. So this guy wakes up, finds out that he's killed his mother. He's got these kind of powers. Shield comes and grabs him and takes him away, secures him, and then sends him over to Professor X for, so the Professor X can work on him and help him control his powers because Shield doesn't know what to do. And then later on, it's discovered that none of that happened. Nick Fury doesn't remember any of this happening. He didn't do all of this sort of stuff because this guy, who they call a magician, has a way to manipulate reality and make people think and not think certain things. And I have a couple of issues with the whole thing. So first of all, did Nick Fury actually show up, or is that just a figment put into Professor X's mind? And if he did show up, Nick Fury at one point says, "Listen, if I had done something like this, there are people all over the place. They fill out 4 forms every time I take a crap, so they're watching me at every point in time. So somebody that's not there would have an indication, or where did Nick Fury go? Unless this guy has the power to completely alter the entire world." And I don't know, that's a pretty big power, and that's not explained if that's the situation. If it's on the other hand that he just put this thought into Professor X's head that he was meeting with Nick Fury and getting this guy, there's a couple of things. One, there's the Gurney that brought him in was a special unit, and number two, I thought Professor X was like the most powerful telepath upon this planet, and he had some internal defenses against mind manipulation. So if this guy can break through that, I guess he's not the most powerful telepath or mind manipulator on the planet, and this guy is, which changes, the makeup of the stories all again. It's never made clear. Magical goes on this, and again, Professor X doesn't look any deeper into that, even when Magical's out there on a job right away type of thing, and he doesn't investigate it any deeper. It's just, why have you not done that? He does curse himself and says, "Boy, I should have." And you think maybe it was because of this manipulation, maybe, but it's never entirely clear. And at the end of it, for this most incredibly powerful reality warping magician, he just sort of wanders off and says, "Yeah, I'm going to step away from your lives for now because I bring a lot of grief and that sort of thing, and I don't necessarily want that to happen." So this entirely powerful entity just sort of wanders off, never to be seen again. There was some of that things happening with these plot lines and some of these ideas that show up, and all of a sudden they are no longer showing up, or they're not followed through. Very soon after this, or around this point in time, Rogue loses Gambit's power, and now she can absorb powers again. Why? I don't know. It just happens. Nightcrawler discovers that he's homophobic once he finds out that Colossus is gay and comes out of the closet. Why? I don't know, but that's the way that goes. And he gets Nightcrawler gets ticked off about a number of things and decides to leave the X-Men. So, in true X-Men fashion, this was the other thing I found about this entire series. I know it's alternative takes, and we get that. Even this one is about Cable, and Cable's a different Cable than the one that's in the mainstream. But a lot of these stories could very well be mainstream X-Men, and it would sit beside the mainstream X-Men books with a couple of little tweaks in here and there. It didn't really strike me as being that much of a different world. Again, I was entertained, but I didn't really see the same sort of difference that I saw in, say, Miller and Bendis' material. So, once again, this is sort of the X-Men trope. Look, we got somebody from the future, Cable, and he comes back and say, "Listen, if I don't kill somebody, in this case Professor X, bad things will happen in the future. Trust me on that one." That's an X-Men trope that's been going on since Days of Future Past. And it repeats itself again and again, so why not? Here we are visiting the same sort of ground in Ultimate X-Men. This is a nice Michael Turner cover, by the way. So Cable comes back and does all that sort of stuff and blibbly blab. It's a story you've sort of read before with a slightly alternative take. Bishop shows up for it as well as part of it. There's this one little issue here, and again, this is another thing Beast had died earlier, and it was kind of a traumatic thing. And I liked that idea, not because I'm, heavy about death of a character, but the idea that this is being the ultimate universe, not the mainstream. If you kill a character, that character can stay dead, because it's not the main body, and that will affect a whole whack of things, different stories, different way they're being told, reactions from people, and what have you, because of that particular death. But when you bring them back, you're just going back into the same old comic trope, and I don't think that should be the case for a book like Ultimate X-Men, which is supposed to be a different take. Now, however, I will say, bringing Beast back, there was a logical reason to bring him back. It made sense the way that he came back, so I don't fault that. It's just that I think that if you're going to make that decision to off a character, it's not a bad idea to stick with it. And one of the issues that I had with this particular one that he came back is like, what for? He doesn't do much beyond this for coming back. I mean, he was working on the legacy virus, which doesn't get any real play in this entire series, so it was not really necessary to bring him back at all. But here he is coming back. And again, more X-Men tropes. We're going to get into a number of things here. This one here too is the whole idea of multiple X teams. So you've got the X team that's hanging out at the manor. Charles Xavier apparently died with a cable, although we know he didn't. And Scott Summers has decided to make it into a school type of deal instead of just a fighting force. So we've got that group of X-Men hanging out over there. We've got a Nightcrawler goes down into the underground and runs into the Morlocks. So we got that group of X-Men. We've already ran into the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, so we got that group of X-Men. And then Bishop decides that the war's not done yet, so he puts together his own band of former X-Men, and so we have yet another team of X-Men, which is to say, another sort of mainstream trope that happens in the X-Men is very multiple X teams. With attitudes, and sometimes they run into conflict, and sometimes they're going off in this direction or that direction. And usually, when shit hits the fan, the call goes out to bring in all the X-Men. And then this was again another thing that I did stop reading the X-Men is because of the multiple characters. Like, it just seemed that in every issue there'd be a new character, or a new dozen characters. How do you keep track of all of them, and are all of them important? I prefer if they have a smaller group and we focus on these heroes a little bit more than just doing a scattershot approach and having hundreds of various X-Men with whatever you want to have as their special ability. Just we'll just call it a mutant, and then you're done. You can have whatever power we want you to have, and it could be better than some of these characters, or worse, whatever we need, we'll create the character for it, and then if we need to kill that character because we think, oh, we don't know what to do with it, do that too. Just so many multiple X-Men and X-Men teams, and once again, we're following that trope in the Ultimate X-Men. This is just to show you the Dazzler going through her power type of thing, where she can explode the Sentinel type of thing. Now it's not more than just a light show. It's a powerful explosive that she can now control. And the final arc from Kirkman is Apocalypse. Now I actually like this. I like the growth of how Apocalypse is actually hiding within Sinister's body and then becomes this creature. And there is a grand fight, and it's a very solid fight, and characters die because of this fight with Apocalypse. Jean Grey unleashes the Phoenix Force to defeat Apocalypse. I'm spoiling it for you. And then after all is said and done, she resurrects those that died. So now she's got the power to resurrect. Well, I guess Phoenix, that sort of makes sense that you can resurrect a power. And then she goes and says, well, you know what? I've got things to do now. I've got to, I'm now one. Jean Grey and Phoenix are one. I've awakened after all these years. I am now free, type of deal. I have things to do out in the universe. Goodbye, X-Men. And then Kirkman leaves the series. So I'm looking at this thing, and well, that's not a bad place. Okay, Jean Grey is this very powerful Phoenix thing, and now she's left the X-Men. She's off. We'll be able to tell new stories without Jean Grey, which would be kind of interesting. But of course, once Kirkman leaves, we get into the Ultimatum, which is in itself a whole. This is the last of the Kirkman issues, number 93, with the Phoenix Force and what have you. But then starting with issue 94, what's Aaron Collette? That looks like his name, and Mark Brooks as the artist. Take the Ultimates down the Ultimatum, March of Ultimatum for 4 issues, and then the 3 issues for actual Ultimatum. Now that's a separate video because that's a whole thing when it's a shutdown of the entire Ultimate universe. But here we have these 7 issues within the Ultimate X-Men, and really the first 4 are like a fever dream, and it's just like, oh, we're going to close down this universe, so who cares about anything that's happened in the past type of deal. I mean, there is connection, so that's a bit extreme for me to say that. But right off the bat, we get Jean Grey. The group are playing baseball. Jean Grey's back there playing baseball. Nightcrawler's back, and he says, basically, oh, sorry about all that. I'm better now. Like I've accepted things, and so I'm coming back home. That whole story, that whole it had moments when Nightcrawler was homophobic and experiencing it and dealing with the fact that one of his closest friends was gay and dealing with that situation and learning to overcome it. But it was never really explored that deeply, and now he's just back home saying, hey, I'm okay now. I've made my peace with it. We're good. Yay. And Jean coming back, I thought she was gone. What happened? Why are you back? Turns out that this story is actually taking place about 2 months after that. And Jean was flying around the cosmos looking for heaven so she could resurrect her dad. And I'm thinking, that's just dopey. It's just dopey on so many levels. And the biggest one that I have is that this is the Phoenix Force that has been, trapped within for years, looking for a place to get out. And this is the first thing for 2 months that it can think about doing. There's not other things. Anyways. So it turns out that, this little 4-issue block before we get to Ultimatum is like some sort of fever dream where Colossus is jacked up on a drug called Banshee. That mutates the mutants to give them extra strength, and he's been taking it all along. He's an addict to these steroids because he's just not strong enough to move around in his organic metal without it. That's not really been discussed anywhere in the previous 93 issues, but okay, we'll go here. And topping off, this particular drug is based on Wolverine's DNA. And what happened in the past was that Professor X and Magneto, when they weren't at each other's throats, they actually used some of Wolverine's DNA to create this drug, and Professor X tried it out on himself, growing some claws of his own and taking on a Jurassic Park Velociraptor. What? Yeah, yeah, all of that's going on here. We run into mutated versions of Alpha Flight. Rain Sinclair, who was Wolfsbane, is now, because of the drug, she's Sasquatch. We got a bunch of other characters from there. They've come back to take North Star back with them because, and so that's why the conflict comes into this fever dream, and the whole idea was that they were perhaps going to create an army of mutated mutants to work for Magneto and take over the world. And at the end of it, all said and done, Quicksilver comes up and says, well, that really was plan B, so we're going to go to plan A now. So we have this, as I say, fevered story that... one thing, though, I will mention about some of the covers that we've seen, especially in, going from 66 to 100, is that they're not all just posing. They actually, convey something that's happening within the book for most of the covers, and I appreciate that. Ultimatum, again, that's going to be a whole separate thing when they decided that, Marvel decided we're going to shut down the Ultimate Universe. There's going to be a massive chaos thanks to Magneto, and one of it is flooding of Manhattan, whatever, and a number of characters dying from the flooding of Manhattan. And I'm actually okay with the whole ultimatum, the way that the approach, because this was supposed to be an alternate universe and something this powerful, this earth shattering that kills some of the heroes. It would make sense, and I would follow that storyline. But that's a different story. And finally, we get to issue number 100, which basically is now where actually Ultimatum is going on now. There's been about one or two issues of Ultimatum. There's still three more to come, and then there's all the connections or whatever. So this is sort of part of that run on Ultimatum and that storyline. So this is more for a discussion when I discuss the shutdown of the Ultimate Universe and Ultimatum itself. But this is the final issue of Volume 1 of the Ultimate X-Men, issue number 100. So overall, I was entertained by this particular run. I don't think it's great. If you liked or I like the Ultimate X-Men, the stuff from Miller, Bendis, and Vaughn, and you've been reading and enjoying it, this is fine. This is entertaining on that front. And if you just like X-Men story and some other powers, this one's not that far from the existing mainstream X-Men. It was fine for that as well. I was entertained. I'm not necessarily going to recommend it to just anybody coming off the street type of thing. Well, you got an Ultimate X-Men running or a superhero run. I know I'm not going to recommend it in that way. But if you are reading and have been reading this is an all right ending. I was entertained. As far as collectability is concerned, there's really not a lot here. Not a lot of stellar artists in here. I mean, maybe somebody's collecting Robert Kirkman stuff. Maybe this one here because it's the 100th issue and the last issue. So there'd be elements about that. As far as spec and investment, I don't see anything happening here as far as spec and investment. All of these books, for the most part, can be found in the dollar bin. I did buy a couple of them for $2 or $3 later on just to complete the series, and that's often the case. I'll fill as much as I can with $1, but then when I'm down to the last couple, if I can find them even for a couple of bucks, I will buy that to fill up the collection or complete the collection, which I did for that. So, but there's no real spec or investment in here. Overall, the whole Ultimate X-Men storyline itself, 1 to 100 and annuals 1 and 2, Ultimate War, for me, I think it's worth the read. It's an enjoyable read. It's the Miller stuff and the Bendis stuff really do take on a different take of the X-Men, and it would have been nice if we had gone a little bit more and continued with that sort of thing rather than just sort of soften the edges and become more and more like a mainstream X-Men title. But overall, I did enjoy the read, and if you're into the X-Men type of thing and the superhero type of thing, I thought it was a fairly good read overall for the whole 100 issues. As far as any of the spec and investment for the whole thing, various artists, various writers, and again, issue number 1 perhaps, and some of the others, but really it's not a book for speculation and investment. It's if you're collecting the Ultimate Universe, if you're collecting everything X-Men, and if you are, good luck to you. You're going to need about 10 or 20 long boxes for everything X-Men, maybe even more. Probably more. So it's good. It's a good read, and it fits in nicely with the collection of the Ultimate Universe. And I am trying to get everything from the Ultimate Universe because I'm that way. So that's it. That's it for the Ultimate X-Men. What did you think? You like the Ultimate X-Men? Was it something that you would recommend? Anyways, that's it for today. Be good to yourself. Be good to others. And, we'll talk again soon.